I know, trade trees are kind of ridiculous. Hello.
Welcome to another episode.
So, Cornback Kings Talk.
I'm your host, Reed.
And it is time for That's So Kings, the podcast.
And let's hop into this
Podcast. For real. Good day, Los Angeles and Kings fans everywhere. Welcome back to episode 2 of That's So Kings, the podcast. Whether you're listening on the Buzzsprout Audio Network or live here uploaded here on YouTube. Trades are common. You negotiate, that's the art of a trade, negotiating and getting what each team wants. Sometimes trades can have effects and the cause of that and the causes before that to make this trade more relevant and look at it in revisionist history. That's why I've taken the liberty of looking up the Jeff Carter deal and the second one, because there's a first one where he goes from Philly to Columbus, which turns into Jakub Voracek, Sean Couturier, and another draft pick, which Philly, I believe, used it on a guy who's, I don't know if he's still with the organization, but that's not how we're doing. We're doing the Kings trade from Columbus to LA, Jeff Carter. Let's get started. Jeff Carter was traded by the Blue Jackets to LA, of course. That's why you're watching this video. For Jack Johnson, a first-round pick. That's it. That first-round pick was in 2013, the year right between all the two cup wins, which, lucky for Columbus, but also good for us. We got the best player out of this deal. Jack Johnson is a defenseman. That's how you put it nicely, but he's not analytically great. If you want to go into it, there's so many proofs saying the numbers are telling you something that you might need to know. But that first round pick, getting back to you, it became Marco Dano, who's been bumbling around certain organizations, and we'll get back to him actually right now. He was then traded to Chicago in the first Brandon Saad deal, and he stayed there, and then he stayed in Chicago for a bit, and then got traded in the Andrew Ladd deal, which I'll get into more details on that. But there was another player that was in the first Brandon Saad deal, and there was Alex Broadhurst, who was in another trade involving Jeremy Moore, to go to the Blackhawks. See, this is how convoluted it gets. Morin was then flipped to the Leafs, I believe. Well, I actually got right here. Morin was then traded to the Leafs, and then for Richard Panik. Then Panik went to Arizona, and then he's now in Washington, so he signed a free agent deal with them. Then Morin then went from Toronto, San Jose, in the James Reimer deal, and that's revisionist history. That's been a wash. But that second Marco Dano deal was actually Dano, a 2016 first, which they flipped to going to Winnipeg for Andrew Ladd. And Andrew Ladd was returning to the Blackhawks, and he played some games that year. The Blackhawks didn't do well. So that pick became Herman Lutzbov, which I believe is a Russian forward in the Philly organization. How did Philly get that pick? They actually swapped picks with the Jets. And besides Rupsov's draft position, where they picked him, they also got a 2016 third, so that the third in that same draft, which has become a guy that I don't know if he's even in the league. But Winnipeg did pick Logan Stanley, who has progressed, but he's stuck in the AHL. But of course, the Brendan Saad original deal goes back, and that affects Artemi Panarin. And that says Panarin to Columbus, and with Tyler Mott, 2016 sixth, and some other, and that is it. Mott was then flipped from Columbus to Vancouver for UC Jokinen, who didn't play much after that trade. But going to Chicago saw returning Anton Forsberg, a 2018 fifth, which they packaged to get a third. And then that third was for them to move up with San Jose, and San Jose got that another third. Well, swapped thirds and traded it for prospect Jonathan Dahlen, who had some promise, but I haven't heard a thing from him. But Forsberg came back to the second Brandon Saad deal, was then traded for Gustav Forsling for Calvin DeHaan and Alexis Sorella. Sorella's been flipped for Ian McCoshen. But that 2017 sixth going to Columbus, I know, trade trees are kind of ridiculous, was actually packaged in the Matt Duchene deal, along with a 2019 first that became Lassie Thompson, a conditional first that didn't pan out for Ottawa because Duchene signed with a different team. That's how the condition was. And also, it was also for Julius Bergman, who's with Columbus, but I'm probably wrong on that because I did check his hockey DB, and I believe he's in the Rangers' hands now in the Adam McQuaid deal that happened. But going to Ottawa, besides that sixth from the Saad deal and Lassie Thompson, that 2019 first, was prospect Vitaly Abramov, who's had a cup of coffee with the NHL. So how does this all affect the Kings? It doesn't really. It's more other teams. So you can say we fleeced Columbus, correct, because here's the reasoning. We had this kid, Slava Voynov, coming up, and he was playing 17 minutes, and Dean Lombardi at the time, our GM at the time, knew that to put Slava in, he had to get someone out. And it was a rare occasion where you can bring someone in the forwards and then bring up a young guy on D and take a D out. That actually helped. And that actually helped out a lot. And that's kind of why we won the Cups. And even, I don't want to get into Slav Voynov off the ice stuff, and he's back in Russia. I don't think he's ever coming back to the US of A. But that's a story for another serious time. I'm just fascinating how Columbus was so negligent to deal him. I remember reading at the time, Carter was someone not really easy with management at the time. It was kind of like a layover, if you want to use an aviation term, for passengers that go from, let's say, LA to smaller airport. You have to go through a middle airport just to get there. And I think the best thing for Carter is that he had some term and he's playing in Los Angeles. Who doesn't want to play here in LA? And maybe he gets flipped, or with hopefully another season or this season returning, there has to be some budget cuts because revenue loss. Maybe he gets one bought out, but he has an illegal contract, and Michael Richards has had this. When I get to the effects of the Richards deal, that's more convoluted, and I shouldn't talk about that anymore. They signed contracts before the 2013 lockout, and there's now recapture penalties if Carter retires as a King, but I don't think that should happen. It should affect the Flyers because it should affect the team that signed him, which I don't think I'm the authority to figure on what things should and shouldn't do. But it's very interesting seeing how teams move guys and use other pieces to make this one simple trade mushroom into a big tree. That's why these are kind of fun to look up, and just seeing how the dominoes fell and all that it's quite interesting. I think besides the LA Kings winning the Jeff Carter trade, of course they got the best player out of the initial trade, but falling out of this, I feel like Columbus actually did win the effects of it, because they didn't turn Jack Johnson into anything. He walked. He went to Pittsburgh, and I think he might be overpaid. But trading assets is what a GM does, and what they did with Mark O'Donoghue and packaging him to first go to Chicago and getting Brandon Saad, and then using more. It's like how a chef takes fish and serves it, and if there's leftover fish, he makes it something else. He makes a stew. And I feel like I just quoted a movie for some reason, and this is how business is conducted. You see parts that other teams have, and you negotiate. Like I said, this is a trade is a compromise of negotiations. But not enough business talk. As of hockey stuff, the best player out of this whole tree is Artemi Panarin and 2012 Jeff Carter. Panarin needs no introduction. He had his run with the Blackhawks and then with Columbus, and now he's in New York, and he's shown that he's worth that huge check that they signed the Rangers signed. But it's interesting seeing these little side deals. Arizona got Richard Panik and from Arizona, and for Jerry Morin, I believe, or from Chicago. So they put Panik, Morin, as I said in before, and they turned that into Laurent Dauphin. Not really major, but they did trade Anthony Duclair, which doesn't affect this trade tree, but that does affect his career. Of course, players' life changes with trades. That's kind of obvious. But I'm fascinated. But that second guy that they got, Laurent Dauphin, he was been in many other trades. So he went back to Arizona after being traded from Arizona to Chicago. So he went back. Then he went to Nashville, and now he's in Montreal. And Nashville has traded them a decent bottom six guy, Michael McCarron. But this is not a Nashville Predators podcast. This is not a Coyotes podcast. This is an LA Kings podcast. How does it affect the Kings? They made the first domino, and everyone did the rest. I'm just very fascinated by these trades, and it was very fun to do. That is it for this episode. If you're on YouTube, click like if you like this video. Hit subscribe if you're new. Share the link. Turn on post notifications. You know what to do if you're on YouTube. If you're on the Buzzsprout Audio Network, thank you for doing that especially. You'll get probably the audio version first. If you're on both sites, follow me on social media. I'm more available on Twitter to contact and ask questions. Family, feel free to message me personally. Don't use social media. Just very interesting to look at, as I said previously. Next up, we sit down. We discussed the moves that went wrong or went right since 2014, and can you blame management, and can you blame the ideas at the time? That's all I'm going to give you. That's it for this video and this podcast. I'll see you all next time. Bye.